Revenge with Amy. You know that feeling when you've spent 8 years making someone else look competent, and the moment you finally expect to be seen, really seen, they hand you a $1 picture frame with a printed certificate inside that says valued team member in Comic Sans. Yeah, Comic Sans. I'm not making that up. 8 years at Pinnacle Group. 8 years of being the person my division VP, my direct boss, called his secret weapon in private and his support staff in meetings. 8 years of fixing his forecasts, rewriting his presentations the night before board reviews, and answering Slack messages at 11 p.m. because he couldn't remember how to pull a pivot table. And for my 8th work anniversary, he handed me that frame in front of the whole open floor and said with genuine enthusiasm, "We had it laminated." I stood there holding it. My name was spelled wrong, 1 letter off, 8 years, and he got my name wrong on the certificate. My co-worker, a junior analyst I'd been mentoring for 2 years, caught my eye from across the room. She pressed her lips together like she was physically holding in something. I gave her the tiniest shake of my head. "Not here. Not here. Not now." I said thank you. I put the frame on my desk, and 3 hours later, I got an email that changed everything. Before I get into that, if you've ever been the invisible engine keeping someone else's machine running, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It's free, and frankly, it's more than I got for 8 years of keeping the lights on. Thanks. So, the email, it came from our parent company's corporate communications team. Subject line, Pinnacle Group, Strategic Review Initiative. The short version, our parent company, a private equity firm out of Chicago called Ashford Capital, had decided to conduct a full operational review of all its portfolio companies. They were sending a senior managing director named Lena Voss to our office for 2 weeks to evaluate leadership effectiveness and department ROI. I read it twice. Then I looked at the picture frame on my desk. Then I opened the picture frame on my desk. Then I opened my bottom drawer. People think the quiet ones aren't paying attention. My boss, I'll call him my director because that was his title and I refuse to give him more personality than that. My director had been running our analytics division like a personal fiefdom for 4 years. He had a gift for 2 things, taking credit and avoiding accountability. Every win was his vision. Every miss was his team's execution failure. He was the kind of manager who forwarded your email to senior leadership with 1 line added at the top. "Great thinking from my end, see below," and never once thought you'd notice. I noticed. For 3 years, I'd been keeping a folder, not out of spite, at least not at first, out of survival. When you work for someone who rewrites history in real time, you learn fast that your memory alone isn't enough. So I kept copies, emails where he'd explicitly approved decisions he'd later called mistakes, Slack messages where he'd asked me to just handle things that were clearly above my pay grade, budget reports where the numbers I'd flagged as problems were ignored until they became crises he'd then present solutions to, solutions I'd drafted and presentations I'd built. The folder was substantial. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. But when I read that email about Lena Voss arriving in 10 days, I felt something shift in my chest, the way the air changes right before a storm. Not dread, something closer to readiness. My director appeared at my desk the next morning at 8:45. He was wearing the blazer he only wore when he was nervous, charcoal gray, slightly too tight across the shoulders. He'd been promoted into his role from a sales background, which meant his default setting under pressure was performance. "Big news," he said, like I hadn't already read the company-wide email. "The Ashford Review," I said. Right. He perched on the edge of my desk uninvited. "Listen, this is a big opportunity for the division. I need us to put together a story. Something tight, something visual. Performance highlights, efficiency metrics, the works. Can you pull the Q2 and Q3 reports and build me a deck by Thursday?" "The Q2 and Q3 reports are going to show we ran 11% over on the Caldwell project," I said, "because the vendor scope change you approved in April wasn't accounted for in the revised budget." He waved his hand. "We don't lead with that, we contextualize it, frame it as a strategic pivot." I looked at him. "Just make it look healthy," he said. "Lena Voss is a big picture person. She doesn't need to get lost in line items. Got it, I said. He pointed at me like I'd said something clever. That's why you're my MVP. He walked away. I turned back to my screen. I built 2 decks. The first one was accurate. It showed what had actually happened across 8 quarters, where we'd grown, where we'd slipped, what had caused each variance. It was not a flattering document. It was an honest one. The second one was what he wanted. I moved numbers around. I renamed cost overruns as investment in scalable infrastructure. I changed the y-axis on 2 charts so the trend lines looked like growth instead of a plateau. I buried the Caldwell variance inside a footnote. On Wednesday afternoon, he came to my desk. Show me. I pulled up the second deck. He nodded, slowly, scrolling. This is good. This is really good. He stopped on one slide. Delete the client satisfaction dip in Q3. And this line here, move it from staffing overage to talent development initiative. I paused. That staffing overage is attached to approved timesheets. If Ashford pulls payroll records, the category mismatch is going to flag immediately. They're not going to pull payroll in the first week, he said. They're looking at strategy, not bookkeeping. Okay, I said. I'll update it. He patted the top of my monitor, not my shoulder, my monitor, like he was rewarding a machine, and walked back to his office. I sent him the version he wanted. Then I did something else. I opened the shared drive folder that Ashford Capital's review team had set up for document submissions. It was labeled External Review, Pinnacle Analytics. I had access because I was the division's data coordinator. My director didn't know I'd been added to the permissions list 2 days earlier by someone on Lena Voss's team who was cross-referencing document owners. I didn't upload my director's deck. I uploaded the raw files. Every source spreadsheet, every original export, the actual numbers, unformatted, with version timestamps showing exactly what had been changed and when. I named the file Analytics Division, Q2, Q3 Source Data, unedited, and I placed it inside a subfolder labeled Background Reference Materials. It was a breadcrumb. If Lena Voss was the kind of person who did her homework, and everything I'd read about her suggested she was exactly that kind of person, she would find it. I closed the laptop and drove home. On the way, I stopped at a drive-thru and got a coffee. It was the best coffee I'd had in months, and I was paying for it myself, which meant it came with exactly 0 strings attached. Lena Voss arrived on a Tuesday. She was not what I'd expected, which is to say, she was not performative. She walked into the office in a grey blazer and dark slacks and no entourage, introduced herself to the front desk by her first name, and went straight to the conference room she'd booked for the week. No announcement. No tour. She'd sent a simple calendar invite to each department lead the Friday before. 30-minute working session. Your numbers, your words. No slide decks necessary. My director did not take that instruction well. I know because he came to my desk at 7:50 that morning in a clear state of panic. She said no slide decks. What does that mean? It means she wants to have a conversation, not watch a presentation, I said. That's not how you do a review. You need the visual. He was pacing. Can you come in with me? Sit at the table, have the files up. So if she asks anything technical, I can just... You want me to be your backup drive? I said. He stopped. What? I'll come, I said. But I have a 9 o'clock with the junior team. Push it. I'll see what I can do. I did not push it. I kept my 9 o'clock. He went into his meeting with Lena Voss alone, which was exactly what needed to happen. I found out later from someone who was in the hallway that the meeting ran 45 minutes over, that Lena had asked him 3 specific questions about the Caldwell project and that he had answered all 3 differently. That at one point she had pulled up a document on her laptop and turned it toward him and he had said, I'd have to have my team verify those numbers. His team, meaning me. Around 11, one of Lena's analysts, a quiet guy in his late 20s who introduced himself as the review team's data lead, appeared at my cubicle. Hi, he said. Sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to cross-reference some of the Q3 analytics submissions. Your name is on most of the original files in the background reference folder. I turned my chair toward him. Yes, I manage the division's data coordination. Your director said he oversees all the modeling directly. I kept my face completely neutral. He sets the strategic direction. I handle the execution layer. The analyst nodded, made a note. Would you be willing to walk me through the Caldwell project timeline? I'm seeing two different cost figures in the record. Of course, I said. Pull up a chair. For the next hour, I walked him through everything. I didn't editorialize. I didn't say your director is a liar or this number was changed at his request. I just walked through the actual history, document by document, timestamp by timestamp, and let him draw his own conclusions. I answered every question directly. When I didn't have the answer on hand, I said so and told him exactly where to find it. At one point, he stopped typing and looked at his screen comparison, the submitted deck versus the source data I'd uploaded. These Q3 margins are different, he said. The deck was an executive summary, I said. The source file is the raw export. He looked at me. By a significant amount. Yes, I said simply. He went back to typing, faster now. Before he left, he said, "This was really helpful. You clearly know this department inside and out. I've had a lot of time to learn it," I said. That afternoon, I passed the glass conference room. Lena Voss was alone inside, laptop open, the source files I'd uploaded on screen. She wasn't looking at the pretty deck. She was in the spreadsheets. She looked up when I passed. I gave her a small nod. She nodded back. I walked to the break room and poured myself a cup of the bad office coffee, the kind that tastes like it was brewed through a paper bag. Normally, I hated it. That afternoon, it tasted fine. Thursday came, and the temperature in the office changed. It's hard to describe if you've never worked somewhere undergoing an outside review, but I'll try. It's like every conversation happens 2 inches off the ground. People speak in careful, measured sentences. The copy machine feels louder than usual. Everyone is simultaneously trying to look productive and trying not to do anything that might be scrutinized. My director had entered what I can only call negotiation mode. He was suddenly visible in ways he never was before, stopping at people's desks, asking about their projects, laughing too loud at things that weren't that funny. He was building the appearance of a manager who was engaged and present, which required him to actually be engaged and present, which was clearly exhausting him. He called me into his office and shut the door. The review team flagged an issue with the Q3 vendor costs, he said, sitting behind his desk with the control energy of someone trying not to vibrate, specifically around the 2 subcontractors we used on the Halcyon account. They're saying the invoices don't match the services documentation. I already knew what he was going to say next. I need you to go back into the expense system and adjust the service category tags. Split the cost across 2 or 3 budget lines so it's not sitting there as a lump sum. I looked at him. The Q3 books are closed. Any change to a finalized line item triggers an automatic exception report that goes directly to finance. Can you suppress the report? No. Can you? No, I said again, quieter this time. I can't change closed period records without creating a paper trail that implicates whoever made the change, which would be me. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to do anything improper. I'm asking you to recategorize for clarity. Recategorizing invoices after the audit period closes is not a clarity exercise, I said. It's a material misstatement. He stood up. You work for me. I do, I said. Which is why I'm telling you that if I touch those records, I'm the one who goes down for it, not you. There was a long silence. Fine, he said. I'll handle it myself. I have admin credentials. You do, I said. He walked me to the door. I went back to my desk and immediately opened a new email to myself. I wrote down everything he'd just said, word for word with the time, 10:22 a.m., Thursday. Request to alter closed period vendor expense records. Request declined on compliance grounds. The director stated he would make changes using his own admin access. I sent it to my personal email and archived it. At 10:48, I saw the exception report trigger in the system dashboard. He'd gone into the vendor records and moved $60,000 across 3 separate budget lines, 2 of which had no logical connection to the services described in the original invoices. the tax classification on one of the vendor entries, a sole proprietorship registered in Illinois, didn't match the new expense category he'd assigned it to. The system flagged it automatically. I watched the flag appear, a little red indicator in the bottom right corner of my dashboard, blinking. I could have called finance. I could have submitted a correction ticket. I could have fixed it in 20 minutes. I closed the dashboard and went to get water. At 11:15, an email landed in my inbox, CC'd to Lena Voss and Ashford Capital's finance director. It was addressed to my director from the review team's accounting lead. The subject line was, Urgent, Q3 vendor reclassification discrepancy. The email noted that a manual reclassification of vendor expenses had been detected in the Analytics Division's Q3 records. The entries had been modified that morning. The tax registration on one vendor did not match the new expense category. They were pulling the original invoices and requesting an explanation. I looked over the partition toward my director's office. He was staring at his screen. He looked the way a person looks when they realize the floor has been gone for several seconds and they're only now noticing. He looked up and caught my eye. I was holding my water bottle. I raised it slightly, the smallest possible toast, and took a sip. He looked back at his screen and started typing with the frantic energy of someone trying to outrun a landslide. You can't outrun a landslide. I've seen people try. Friday morning, my director came in early. I know because his car was in the lot when I arrived at 8. That almost never happened. He was usually the last in and first out, a pattern I had documented. Not because I planned to use it, but because I had learned to document everything that seemed like it might matter someday. He bypassed my desk entirely, which told me his strategy had shifted. I was too dangerous to involve now. He was looking for a softer target. The softer target was my mentee. Her name was Briar. She was 26, 3 years with the company, the kind of employee who ran toward problems instead of away from them, and still somehow always ended up blamed for the problems she'd tried to prevent. She reminded me, painfully, of who I'd been at 26. I was getting my coffee when I heard my director's voice carrying down the hallway. He was standing near the cluster of analyst desks, talking to Lena Voss in the loud, explanatory tone he used when he wanted an audience. The FinRe Data Governance Update. It's a mandatory compliance piece, really time-sensitive, he was saying. I assigned it to one of my junior analysts about 6 weeks ago. Unfortunately, she dropped the ball. I've been trying to coach the team up, but this is exactly the kind of gap you see when you're working with early career staff. Lena was listening with her arms at her sides. Her face gave nothing away. A compliance gap like that could carry real regulatory exposure, she said. Absolutely, and I'm taking ownership of it, he said, in the tone of someone who was demonstrably not taking ownership of it. It's a management challenge. You can't catch everything. I set down my coffee and walked back to my desk. Briar was pale. Her hands were flat on her keyboard, not typing, just resting there like she needed something to hold on to. She turned to me when I sat down. He never told me about the FINRA update, she said quietly. I didn't even know it existed. He never forwarded anything to me. I know, I said. Do you still have access to your email from 6 weeks ago? Yes. Good. Don't delete anything. Just sit tight for 10 minutes. I opened my archive and searched. It took 40 seconds to find it. 6 weeks prior, the compliance team had sent a division-wide memo about the FinRe data governance deadline. It was flagged high priority. It listed required actions and specified that the division lead, my director's exact title, needed to review and sign off personally. The memo explicitly noted that this was not a task to delegate to junior staff due to access restrictions. His red receipt was in the thread. He had opened it. He had not responded. He had not forwarded it. He had not acted on it. I hid forward. I addressed it to my director, and I CC'd Lena Voss, the head of compliance, and Bria. Subject, RE. FinRe Data Governance Update. Clarification on assignment responsibility. The body was short. I noted that in reviewing the compliance communication thread, the original memo had specified that division lead sign-off was required and that delegation to junior staff was explicitly not appropriate given access restrictions. I noted that per the server log, the memo had been opened by the director on the date it was sent. I noted that Briar did not have the clearance level required to access the relevant compliance filing portal. I said I had the forms ready to complete and was available immediately to facilitate sign-off. I hit send. I sat back in my chair and exhaled for the first time all morning. 40 seconds later, I heard my director's office door bang open. He came onto the floor looking for me, but Lena Voss was walking toward him from the other direction, phone in hand, clearly having just read the email. She stopped in front of him. Marcus. That was his name. It was the first time I'd heard her use it. Can we talk about the compliance communication? He looked at Lena, then at me, then back at Lena. There was clearly a miscommunication, he started. The email is quite clear about scope and authorization requirements, she said. Let's get the sign-off done today. And I'd like to make sure Bria's record reflects that this was a leadership oversight, not an analyst error. He didn't answer. He just nodded. Lena turned and walked back toward the conference room. As she passed my desk, she said, without stopping, "Thank you for the clarification, Amy." I was already typing. It was an odd thing to feel, not triumphant exactly, but something settled, like a seam that had been pulled tight for years finally releasing. Marcus did not speak to me for the rest of Friday. The following Monday, Ashford Capital's review wrapped up officially. Lena Voss's team had been in the building for 2 weeks, and by now, even the most oblivious people in the office understood that something was happening. The only question was what shape it would take. Lena announced an all-hands for Tuesday at noon. She called it an open forum. The invite said, "All team members welcome. No agenda restrictions." Marcus held a closed-door meeting with the other 2 department directors Monday afternoon. The walls were not, in fact, soundproof. "Just keep it positive," I heard him say. "Big picture thinking. If she opens the floor, we steer toward growth opportunities, international market positioning, that kind of thing. The support staff, they don't need to be speaking at this. Just let the directors handle the narrative. Support staff." I wrote a project coordination framework this division has operated on for 5 years, but sure, I spent Monday evening going through my folder one last time. Vendor irregularities, the expense reclassification attempt, the Caldwell misrepresentation, the FinRe memo, the pattern of time-stamped work product that bore my fingerprints while bearing his name in the submission field. 8 years of it, organized by date, cross-referenced by project code. I printed nothing, I prepared nothing theatrical. I just knew what I had and where it was. Tuesday's all-hands was held in the large conference room on the 2nd floor, the one with the long oval table and the whiteboard that still had my handwriting on it from a planning session 6 months ago, because Marcus had explicitly asked us not to erase it because it looked dynamic. I sat in the 2nd row. Not the back. I was done with the back. Lena opened the meeting without fanfare. She thanked the team for their cooperation, acknowledged that reviews like this were stressful by nature, and said she wanted the floor to be genuinely open. She meant it. You could tell because she wasn't using the voice people use when they're performing openness. She was just talking, like someone who actually wanted information. Marcus sat at the head of the table. He dressed up. He looked like a man who had spent the weekend convincing himself he was fine. The first few questions were the softballs he'd scripted. International growth, integration strategy. He was nodding along, visibly relaxing, starting to believe the performance was working. Then Lena said, "I want to take a minute before we wrap up." She opened the folder on the table in front of her. I recognized it, plain manila. I reviewed some materials this week that gave me a lot of useful context about how this division operates. And I think it's worth acknowledging publicly that the infrastructure behind the analytics work here is strong, in some cases significantly stronger than the reporting around it has suggested. She paused. The room was very quiet. I also want to say something directly because I think clarity serves everyone better than careful language. She looked at the table. There's a gap in this division between the work being done and the leadership being credited with it. That gap has costs to accuracy, to morale, and to the people whose contributions have been functionally invisible. Marcus shifted in his chair. Lena looked up. Marcus, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to the Cordwell project reporting, specifically the Q3 variance figures. The room held its breath. He started with the context there is nuanced and did not get much further before the words started collapsing on each other. He referenced strategic decisions. He said the team had faced headwinds. He said the numbers didn't tell the full story. Lena let him talk. When he stopped, she turned to me. Amy, she said, the Caldwell project, you were the data coordinator of record? Yes, I said. Can you give us a one-sentence summary of what happened with the Q3 variance? The room turned toward me. I felt 30 sets of eyes land at once. We ran over budget because a vendor scope change was approved in April without updating the baseline, I said. I flagged it in writing, 3 times between April and June. The flags weren't acted on. The silence after that was the kind that has weight. Thank you, Lena said. She wrote something down. She did not look at Marcus. He looked at me. I'd seen that look before. Not anger, because he'd had the sense not to be angry in front of a managing director. Something underneath anger. The look of a person who has just understood fully that the room they thought they were controlling has been someone else's room the whole time. He tried to recover, said something about communication breakdowns and learning opportunities and team alignment going forward. I did not say anything. I didn't need to. After the meeting, I was walking back toward the bullpen when I heard Lena's voice behind me. Amy, do you have a few minutes? I turned around. Of course. We went to the conference room she'd been using all week. She closed the door. She sat down across from me and put the manila folder on the table between us. I'm going to be straightforward with you, she said, because I think you're someone who respects directness. I am, I said. In a typical review situation, when we find this level of structural mismanagement, the response is usually to clear the leadership layer and stabilize. Sometimes that means significant staffing changes. She paused. But what I'm seeing here is that the division's operational backbone is intact. The client relationships are strong. The junior team is capable. The problem wasn't the department. The problem was a single point of obstruction. She tapped the folder. You've been doing 2 jobs, yours and the one above you, for a long time? Yes, I said. Why didn't you leave? I thought about it honestly, the way you do when someone asks you a real question instead of a polite one, because I built something here, not for Marcus, despite Marcus. The team, the client systems, the processes. I know what this place could be if it were run correctly. I didn't want to walk away and watch someone else break it. She nodded slowly. I have to ask you something, she said. And I want you to know this is a real question, not a formality. She met my eyes. Do you want to fix it? Officially, with the authority to actually do it. I looked at her. We're going to make a leadership change, she said. Marcus is being exited today. That decision was made before this meeting. What isn't decided yet is what the division looks like afterward. She leaned forward slightly. I don't want to bring in someone from the outside who needs 6 months to understand the history you already know. I want someone who knows where the damage is and how to repair it. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. It had a title and a number on it. I looked at the title. Division Director, Analytics, Interim. I looked at the number. I was quiet for a moment. I have conditions, I said. She raised one eyebrow. Already? Bria gets a formal written record correction. The FINRA issue gets attributed accurately. It cannot follow her. Done, she said. I want to renegotiate 2 vendor contracts within the first 30 days, including the termination of the Halcyon subcontractors. There's no defensible service record for either of them. You have my authorization, and I need a direct reporting line to your office during the transition, not through another layer. If I'm cleaning this up, I need to be able to move quickly without running into bureaucratic resistance. She looked at me for a moment, Something shifted in her expression, not surprise, exactly, more like confirmation. "You prepared for this conversation," she said. "I prepare for everything," I said. "It's how I got through 8 years." She extended her hand across the table. "Welcome to the new role. Don't let it take you another 8 years to take what you've earned." I shook her hand. When I walked out of the conference room, Bria was at her desk. She looked up with the careful expression of someone who had spent the last week bracing for bad news. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," I said. I stopped at her desk. "I need you to clear your afternoon. We have a vendor audit to start, and I want you running the documentation." She blinked. "Documentation for what?" "For the new division director," I said. She looked confused for exactly 2 seconds, and then she figured it out, and her face did something I won't forget. I know this sounds like something you'd see in a movie, but it was real, and it mattered, and I'm telling you about it because it was the best part of the whole thing, better than the meeting. Better than watching Marcus box up his diplomas and shake hands with the security escort who walked him to the elevator. Bria said, "That's you, isn't it?" It wasn't even a question. "Get your notebook," I said. "We start in 20 minutes. I walked into the corner office. The chair behind the desk was still positioned the way Marcus had left it, angled slightly toward the window, away from the door, which told you everything about how he'd approached the job. I turned it to face the room. I had work to do. Real work, with real authority. For the first time in 8 years, I thought about the picture frame on my desk. The certificate with my name spelled wrong. I hadn't thrown it out. I put it in my bag that morning, actually, because I wanted to keep it as a reminder, not of the humiliation, but of the exact distance between what I had been given and what I had been worth all along. The gap was useful to know. It kept the number in perspective. There's a thing that happens when you finally sit in the right seat. It doesn't feel the way you expect it to. It's not loud. There's no music. You just settle in, and the work starts, and you understand that this is what it was always supposed to feel like the room was built for you, and you just needed someone to finally unlock the door. Or in my case, you needed someone who built the room to realize the person who'd been handing out the wrong keys for 8 years was the one who didn't belong there. So, moral of the story, document everything. Date stamp your emails. Know your own value before anyone else offers you a number. And if someone gives you a picture frame with your name spelled wrong to celebrate 8 years of keeping their division alive, keep the frame. You're going to want the receipt. There's something I've been thinking about since all of this happened. Something I keep coming back to when I try to make sense of it. Marcus didn't fail because he was unlucky. He didn't get caught because Lena Voss happened to be sharp, or because the timing was bad, or because I turned on him. He failed because the thing he was building was always hollow. Every shortcut he took, every report I wrote that he put his name on, every mistake he buried instead of fixed, every junior employee he threw under the bus to buy himself another quarter, those things didn't disappear. They just accumulated. Quietly, in folders, in server logs, in the memory of every person on that floor who watched him take credit for work he didn't do. The weight of what you build, or what you refuse to build, doesn't go anywhere. It just waits. I think about Bria a lot in this context. She was 26, and she was already learning from watching Marcus that the way you survive at work is to protect yourself by sacrificing someone else. That's the most insidious thing about people like him. They don't just damage the spreadsheets. They teach everyone around them the wrong lessons. They model a version of success that requires someone below you to fail. And if you're young, and you're scared, and you don't have anyone showing you a different way, you start to believe that's just how it works. I didn't want that for her. That was actually the thing I cared about most. Even more than the outcome for myself. Not the title, not the salary adjustment, not the corner office that still smelled like Marcus's cologne for 2 weeks after he left. I cared about Bria seeing that the person who documented everything, who stayed professional when it would have been so much easier to get loud and messy, who refused to falsify a single number even when she was directly ordered to. I wanted her to see that person land somewhere better, because I needed to believe it myself. That's the thing about integrity that nobody tells you when you're younger. It doesn't feel like a strategy. It feels like stubbornness. It feels like being difficult. It feels like watching other people get the credit and the promotions and the corner offices, while you sit at your desk knowing the truth and keeping it filed away and wondering if any of it will ever matter. For a long time, it genuinely might not. And you have to decide in that gap who you're going to be anyway. I kept those records for 3 years before they meant anything externally. 3 years of being careful and precise and honest in a place that was rewarding the opposite. And I won't tell you it felt noble. It mostly felt like a lot of extra work that nobody acknowledged. But I also knew that the version of me who falsified those cost categories, who buried Briar's mistake in a compliance report to protect my own position, who erased the uncomfortable truth to make the numbers look healthy, that version of me would have had to keep doing it. One compromise leads to the next. Marcus didn't start out moving $60,000 into forced budget lines. He started with something smaller, something that felt like rounding. What I learned is that your choices don't stay in the moment you make them. They compound. Every time you choose accuracy over comfort, you're building something real, even if no one's watching. Every time you choose the easier wrong over the harder right, you're undermining a foundation you're going to need later. Marcus found that out. I found the other version of that out. I kept the certificate, the one with my name spelled wrong. It's in a drawer in the corner office now, behind the chair I turned to face the door. I keep it because it's a useful reminder of the exact distance between how little I was valued and how much I was actually worth. That gap was always there. The only thing that changed was who was finally paying attention to it. Document everything. Know your own worth before anyone puts a number on it. And when you spend years doing right by your work, by your team, by the truth, even when it costs you, eventually the math catches up. It always does.